know it's no pain, no gain. Go hard till the end. What's the use of playing the game if you ain't aiming to win? My feet.
Okay, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I hope I can measure up to the high bar that Dea set. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all. So I'm going to just walk you through some of the wisdom, hopefully, that I've come up with over the years in watching startups grow up to the point where they're approaching investors. How do they prepare for it? What are the investors looking for? Et cetera, et cetera. So I'm willing to make this fairly interactive. So unless it gets too disruptive, feel free to ask questions. If it's slowing me down too much, I might ask you to hold up some of the questions till the end. Let me get going here. So let me tell you what we're going to walk through. I'm going to say just a few words about what I call the art versus the science of fundraising, and maybe just give you some general thoughts about approaching the fundraising activity. The bulk of the time I want to spend on explaining to you what kind of a tool set I think you should prepare before you ever go talk to any prospective investor. And then finally, at least time allowing, I'll say a few words about delivery skills. So how should you speak when you're in front of an investor? By the way, for any of you who are Twitter users, feel free to, and only if you have good things to say, you're welcome to my Twitter handle. Apparently I shouldn't stand in front of that speaker. Okay, before I start, a preamble or caveat. I'm going to be here to tell you about how to approach angel investors and venture capital or strategic investors, being corporate venture funds. That's what I'm here to talk about, but at the same time I want to tell you, those are not the best sources of funding. The best source of funding in the early days are any form of bootstrapping. I did it. Bear with me. Okay, so, and as you know, bootstrapping, I want to see you. I give up. So I want to see all of you struggle to get as far as you can, make as much progress as you can before you ever go talk to investors. Use the most ideal form of bootstrapping funding is get a customer to pay you money for something. That's non-dilutive funding, and it's a proof point that's going to make your life easier when you get to the investor. So if you can possibly do that, please do so. Other forms would be government grants, another lovely thing if you're in a world where that's a conceivable source. So you get the idea. Now, I was going to say I want to differentiate between the art and the science. So you might think of this as a very analytical process, engaging investors, like having brilliant spreadsheets and lots of graphs and facts and figures. And that's certainly true, but I would argue that the art is even far more important than the science. And because human beings are by nature storytellers. And here's my theory. The human species evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, long before Excel and PowerPoint were invented. And the way leadership was established was through storytelling. And the same is true for startup founders. When you're in front of investors, it's all about how you communicate and simple clarity of communication. I'm going to be referring back to this idea of simple storytelling and simplicity of communication as we go. I will say, literally, storytelling is also important. Like telling story, rather than explaining mechanically how you engage customers, I would rather you just tell me a story about how you want a customer. Or a great way to introduce your company to an investor is to tell your creation story. Like, this all came about because in my last job I had this big problem and it just burned in my head and I had to solve it, and then I did it. And stories like that establish your passion and motivation behind your company. Now, I have an imaginary scenario here where this is the startup CEO doing a presentation, and there's some prospective investors sitting over here, and oftentimes the CEO might be saying, look at my amazing product and let me explain the amazing technology behind my product. And I want to ask you, if that's the case, what is very likely on the mind of the people on the other side of the table about this time? And
How do I make money?
how do I make money? Great. What aren't you telling us? No, that's fair.
What is it?
It's so great. Why haven't you sold it yet?
What?
It's so great. Why haven't you sold it yet?
Fair, no, fair. But I wouldn't be too harsh on the, this is bullshit or whatever. It's just that my point is, it's not all about the product. It's all about the company. It's, is there a company that has the growth potential here? Is there a team that knows how to build this? So all my point is there's a catchphrase amongst many investors, which is, we don't invest in products, we invest in companies. So your job is to don't make the mistake of getting in front of an investor and spending 90% of your time talking about your product. In general, it's more like, is this microphone working?
That's my fault, yeah.
Oh, okay, no, good. In general, I wild guess of the proportion is you spend maybe the first 25% of your time talking about the product, and the rest of the time is all about how you're building a company around that product, how you grow the market, and I'm going to be talking a lot more about this as we go. And another one of my favorite catchphrases is, your mentality walking into that meeting is, it's not about me, it's about them. It's like, think about what they're looking for. Read up. If it's a venture firm, it's relatively easy, because you can go to their website, they'll explain exactly what they look for in a company. They'll explain, you can look at who they've invested in the past, you can look and imagine whether you fit that portfolio. If it's an angel investor, probably a little harder, because there's no website to go to and find out what their portfolio looks like. But through various means, you want to know all about what they're looking for, and then you want to think about how you fit into that. And you want to be asking, you're looking for their feedback actively because part of the meeting with an investor is, like, don't be depressed by pushback and objections. You thrive on pushback and objectives. Why? Because otherwise, if they say no, you have no idea why they said no, and then you go to the next meeting with another investor and you make the same mistake over and over again. So you want to draw out objections, and then you go back and you do one of two things. You either decide, I didn't explain it right, I'm going to do a better job of explaining it, or you decide, maybe we have a fundamental error in our strategy, and we're going to fix that. And then, so it is a constant iterative process. So I've been trying to find the actual facts on a great example being, my understanding is they talked to like 20 investors before anybody wrote a check. Well, think about that. Silicon Valley's biggest creation in the last couple of decades, and they couldn't get anybody to listen to them in the beginning because there were many search engines out there at the time. And everybody thought, why do we need another search engine? And well, the rest is history. Apparently they learned something in that iterative process. And finally, I have an analogy to draw. It's kind of my story. You've probably heard the story of Michelangelo. He was asked, how in the world did he create the statue of David, which many consider to be one of the greatest pieces of art of all times? And said, how did you do that? And he said, well, it was simple. I saw the angel in the marble, and I carved until I set him free. Well, here's my analogy to the fundraising exercise. It might not be clear, but let me explain. You have your head full of a huge amount of information about your company, all kinds of facts and figures. But in the end, when you walk in to talk to an investor, you have a very limited amount of time, and you need to carve out the set of information that's the winning story that gets them excited. And I'm not suggesting you're hiding anything. There's just so much periphery there. It happens to me all the time. I have these guys men, women talking to me, and they're talking about this and that, and the fact, and this graph and that. I'm thinking, yeah, what does this mean? Let's get back to what's the core value proposition, and I'm going to tell you what I think you should say, but beware of giving peripheral information that doesn't matter. And it goes back to that iterative process, that you learn over time. When are they falling asleep, and when are their eyes bright? That's what you're looking for. Whatever's lighting people up, you want to boost your focus on that and to take away other things. Okay, now let's jump into those tools. Oh, in fact, so there's really three tools I want to talk about: an elevator pitch, an executive summary, PowerPoint deck, and there is more that we're way beyond the scope of our discussion tonight, but there's a set of due diligence materials that you have to have prepared, all your legal documents, your deep financial plan, etc. That's more than we could talk about here, but as much of this as possible should be prepared before you start the engagement. So let's take them one by one. Elevator pitch. I have an example of an elevator pitch here. First, a little premise that, the classic talk discussion is an elevator pitch is, well, you get lucky someday and you walk on the elevator with Mark Andreessen and you got 3 floors to tell him your story before he walks out and you got to get him excited. Well, the odds of that happening are very low. Much more likely is that your elevator pitch arms the people around you to do an introduction to Mark Andreessen rather than you meeting Mark Andreessen. So it goes either way. You should practice every day in the car when you're driving somebody somewhere, holding it down under 1 to 2 minutes, explaining the most motivating story of why this is the most amazing company that ever walked the earth, so that when the time comes, it just rolls off your tongue. Now, also, you want to arm the people around you. Now, my example here is one of my companies may ask me if I could introduce them to a friend of mine at a venture firm. And let me read this. I hate reading text to an audience, but I'm going to do it. Hi, Ted. Hope you're doing well and that the golf game is looking good. Please allow me to introduce you to a company called Flextro Tech Sciences, which is currently starting human trials on a new device which promises to cut the cost of knee replacement surgery by 60% and increase resulting ambulatory responsiveness by 30%. They have several medical supply distribution partners already prepared to ink deals upon completion of trials. Their CEO previously ran sales at Medtronic, and their CTO is a UPenn trained MD. Might I follow up, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I want to point out that, as I said, it's not all about the product. I barely said anything about the product. I didn't try to explain how it works or why it's, why it has the equation of the elliptical equal to the transverse, whatever, I didn't try to go there. But what I do talk about is business-oriented facts and figures. Like, I try to get some kind of facts that motivate that this thing really works. I try to say they know how to go to market. So I refer to them having distribution plans already prepared. And there are some subtleties that, things like this, we'll put a huge amount of thought into it, believe it or not. Just doing one paragraph often requires a lot of thought. Like, I may have gone and looked on LinkedIn to find out that Ted was a UPenn grad. So I'm gonna make sure he knows that one of the people on that team is a UPenn grad, because people love their, alumni connections. They're willing to go a little bit more out of the way. And there's any number of ways. They may have worked at the same company they did. Their kids may go to the same school. I don't care what. We'll do whatever to establish a little rapport. So don't underestimate, the importance of the elevator pitch. And one other comment along those lines is, the journalism term, don't bury the lead. If there's something that is particularly interesting about that company, get it right up at the front, because the longer they're reading, if it's not getting exciting, the more chance it gets shipped to the bit bucket or the trash bin. So, I'll give you a great example. I met with a startup company whose name will not be mentioned recently, and I'm sitting in a Starbucks chatting, and 15 minutes in, I'm thinking, God, I'm just not sure I really buy this. I don't know if I can believe it's going to go anywhere. And now all of a sudden the CEO mentioned, and this contract we have with Google is what? And I'm thinking, contract with Google? What the hell? Why wasn't that the first paragraph of the whole conversation? That was burying the lead. I could have gotten up and left before he found out, before I ever discovered that. So don't let that happen. Okay, next up, an executive summary. Blaise Pascal famously said, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have time. It's important that this be short and sweet. For me, it's a no-brainer. Executive summary is a one-page document. If you go one paragraph further than one page, there's too much risk that they're going to look and think, I'll tell you my personal story. This is the general rule of thumb. Executive summaries come in via introductions, whatever, pretty routinely. Somebody wants some feedback or whatever. And And so if it's one page, I open it up and I read it. If it's 2 pages or longer, I think, well, that's too overwhelming to deal with on my screen, so I'm just going to send it over to my printer. And I think, well, while it's printing, I'm going to move on to the next email. And then, about 2 weeks later, there's 10 of those sitting in my printer, and I've never looked at them. It's just don't risk. I hope you get my point there. Don't risk it. People's time is valuable, and why would you waste my time reading your 2 pages because you didn't take the time to shorten it so you could respect my time? That it may be harsh, but that's just the reality. And by the way, that one pager, you're not trying to get a check based on that one pager. You're just trying to get a meeting. All you have to do is get enough interest that somebody wants to talk to you. Now, here's really the gist of what I'm here to talk about this morning. Is I want to walk through the key elements of what creates a great executive summary. And just so you know where I'm going here, really everything I list here is also the key ingredients of a great PowerPoint deck that you're going to use for a live presentation later when you really get the meeting. So most of this argument applies either to the executive summary or the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint just allows more visual goodies and more time, but it's the same message. So let's walk through these. Problem solution. Usually the best way to lead into an executive summary is a problem solution. You establish a big problem in the marketplace. You say, well, one of my startups that I'm deeply involved in right now, we're trying to solve the data exfiltration problem of the Snowden leak, the Home Depot leak, the Sony leak, what have you. So we lead into this by saying, everybody knows corporate America is scared to death. Sony, it established precedent that there's risk that companies will be taken down by this data exfiltration problem. That's a big pain. So before we say a word about what the company does, we establish this big, huge pain point. Then we want to tie our solution directly back to that pain. Here's exactly how we go about solving that problem. And this is going to be repetitive throughout everything I say in the content of the executive summary, but try to think about how they're going to read this and how you're teeing them up simple version of this so that they can go right back and repeat it. And why is that important? Because most investors don't make a decision alone. You penetrate your way in to talk to one person first, that man or woman's got to go draw in other people to get excited too. So you can't have a big complex thing that they can't in turn explain to their colleagues. So look for the problem solution that's easily repeated by them. Daya suggested to me, I think it's a fabulous idea, that at a couple of points here, like this one right here, I should have warned you ahead, sorry for surprising me now, but is there anybody who feels confident, even moderately confident, that you could stand up and in just a few words explain the problem solution of your company? And then we'll all give you a quick feedback. Sure, yeah, the gentleman in the...
Yeah, we come over there or we can stand here?
Come on up here. Quick and dirty, like it was the 1 or 2 paragraphs in the document.
My name is Raj. Very quickly, I'm building a mobile video app where you can broadcast your brainstorms. This is exactly what it says, and tremendous applications in education and brainstorming and get multiple perspectives on a single topic.
Did everybody hear a problem solution? No. No, I mean, it sounds like a great product, but I don't know what problem you solve. Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. Come on up.
Hi, my name is Vishal. We help construction professionals save hours of time building reports. They get capture information using their mobile phones.
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm going to be ruthless. You've got to tell me a problem. I refuse to listen to what your product is until you tell me the pain point out there.
Construction professionals are losing a lot of time creating reports, going back to their desk. We automate that process by mobile phones and cloud solution.
Fabulous. Great. Okay, you'll have your chance in the second. No, I'll ask for volunteers on the other sections here. Okay, I'm suggesting you lead into it with problem solution. Typically, the ordering here, you can go in any order you want. This is the generally best order. Market opportunity. So, what I'm hoping you're going to tell me is some kind of a gradual, like start with a broad definition of a market and then slice it down till we get to what's generally available to you over time and what's available to you in the very beginning. I should have thought of I'm going to try to make up an example. I mean, imagine you're creating a billing tool for gardeners. So, to define the market opportunity, you might start by saying, there are X number of gardeners in the entire United States, or even in the world, I don't care. So number of companies that do gardening. So that would be the total broadest possible view of market. Then you would slice it down, you say, now the number of, this is a mobile app, so the number of gardeners that we believe currently have mobile phones is this. And you might even go even a step further. You might say, our initial target is we're going to start in California where we have X. And, my words are very wordy here, but these things with a little thought can be boiled down into, 1, 2, 3 sentences. I love it if there's, if you know a source of the data, if you can just cite it very simply. The reason we know this number of gardeners is because the American Gardener Association, blah, 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 said that. This is a great thing if you can do it. I call it the verbal equation to set market sizing. So in other words, in my gardening example, you might say, well, if all 1 million gardening companies in America adopted our product at an ASP of $30 per month, our net revenue would be, I can't do the math that fast, but we'd be $1 billion company or whatever we are. I mean, imagine the power of that one sentence. You've combined all the factors into one compact sentence that helps them understand not only the unit economics of how you charge, but how big could you be if you do exceptionally well. I'll tell you, here's where you will have to here's where many companies go wrong. They don't know the real facts they need to say, so they just start spewing out data. They might say, well, the total revenue of all gardeners in America is $7 billion. Well, think about that. That tells me absolutely nothing about how big your company could be. There's no way for me to translate the total revenue of all gardeners in America into how much revenue you can get. So beware of just spewing, interesting information that may not get us to where we need to go. I'm not going to ask for volunteers on this one. I think the upcoming, this one. Okay, so anyway, competition. Think of your discussion of competition more, I might have titled this more as competitive advantage. Because your competitive section, you should talk to you definitely want to be open and honest of who your competitors are. But the discussion is not about them, it's about you. In other words, here's how we are uniquely better than SAP, Microsoft, and Oracle, whoever your competitors are. I see some of these reports come in, and somebody will list 4 competitors and explain what's good about all 4 of them. I'm thinking, wow, what am I supposed to conclude from that? Because you're the expert, not me. If you don't tell me, I don't know what's in your head. Uh-oh. That is not supposed to be there. Okay, good. There we go. Okay, business model, one of my absolute favorites. So, to me, basically, what business model means is who pays what to whom. And most important to me is understanding the microeconomics. What does a transaction look like? Do you charge, dollars per acre of land? Do you charge per gigabyte of storage? And how much do you charge per gigabyte of storage? And so this is kind of the fun, later you're going to be talking about revenue predictions. But these are the underlying assumptions that eventually drive the revenue projections. So that's what we need to see here. Sometimes it's used in business model, aside from just these economic factors in business model, you might want to talk about maybe you're manufacturing something and you're contracting out. That's an important element of a business model. Just basically, we need to understand the kind of plumbing of how your company works in very simple terms. I wonder if I think we should try, I want to ask for volunteers to do this business model thing, but I do want, and so unlike my being mean to the last guys up here, maybe let's pick a volunteer, give us like the 2 or 3 sentences of what your company does, and then say, my business model is, and just tell us. I want to understand the mechanics and economics of how your company works. Yes, the woman, right, yes. Beware, you don't want to stand near that speaker.
So we're building an online marketplace for indie brands for children's apparel. And our business model is we take 30% of the revenue, total revenue from the brands. And our unit economics are CAC based on comparables, and our own calculations is between $11 to $15. And our LTV based on profit is $33.
Great. Oh, that was great. Thank you. I think the only feedback I have is that I think if I were you, I would probably lead into the business model by making sure I was clear on who manufactures, and then I assume you find brands to manufacture and then you resell through your own property. So I'd probably make that clear, and then everything else you said I totally agree with. Okay, great. Anybody else dying to do it? Yeah, go ahead. I think this is kind of fun. I get to rest.
Okay, so we transform existing Wi-Fi router just by a software in motion detection systems, and we make revenue sharing with service providers like Comcast, AT&T, and we retain the 70% of the monthly revenue share. It's just $2 per month instead of $30, $40 per month of ADT, for example.
Okay, good, thank you. I'm going to have to admit, for me, without knowing more about what you said at the beginning, others might have understood it. Hey, that's very intriguing, by the way. I'd like to understand that a little better, but thank you. Okay, moving right along, go-to-market. Oh, Deo was talking about Dave McClure. Before I talk about go-to-market, I had to put this Dave McClure quote up from his Twitter feed. Top 3 reasons our startup failed. Number 1, we didn't sell anything. Number 2, we didn't sell anything. Number 3, we didn't sell anything. And I just can't say it any better than that. But overwhelmingly, when companies fail, it's the efficiency of how you acquire customers. So now I'm going to be incredibly repetitive, but I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. Don't harp too much on your product, because what we're worried about is whether you can sell the product much more than how good the product is. I mean, it's important it's a good product. I don't want to take away from that, but much more important is your go-to-market strategy. So I kind of call it the big dog, the go-to-market strategy. That's the maker. Oh, in fact, here's my other catchphrase, is that you'll get yourself in the door to talk to an investor based on a great product, but you get yourself out of the door holding a check with a great go-to-market strategy. So, it's so different for so many companies, it's hard to generalize, but this is all about how you use sales and marketing strategy to acquire customers. And one of my, depending on your situation, but I think most of the time what I prefer to see is a kind of short-term, long-term breakout. Because like long-term, you want to have a very sophisticated strategy that can ramp you up to a huge company. So you might talk about, some kind of distribution technology or distribution relationships or size of a direct sales force or what have you. But if you're talking only about that grand vision long-term, then the person reading this document is thinking, well, that's really lovely, but you're a 3-person startup right now. How are you selling right now? So I'm differentiating. I would say right now, what do you do? Often the words are like, hey, our team came from the world of Wi-Fi we know everybody in the ecosystem there, so we are making direct calls to old friends at every major company and getting into the people who deal with Wi-Fi at that company. That's a perfectly fine, near-term bootstrapping go-to-market strategy. But then you might layer onto that, over time, we will go to distribution through, honestly, I have no idea how you distribute Wi-Fi technology, but whatever. Hey, would anybody like to take this one up? Great. You're brave, because everybody else is scared, which I don't blame. So I would suggest you do exactly what the last guys did. Just give us a little brief idea of what your company does, and then tell us how you're going to do it.
All right, I had to get up here because there's a dog on the screen. My company is Pup Box. We're a monthly development box for new puppy owners. We send toys, treats, training information to new puppy owners based on the age of their puppy to help them raise their puppy through puppyhood. Our go-to-market strategy has really been revolved around social sharing. So we like to arm our customers with a lot of good content that they can share, especially on Instagram. Over the first 6 months, we've acquired about 30,000 Instagram followers, and the more customers we gain, the more sharing there is, and that kind of propels our success.
Great. That was really good. The only feedback I'd give you is I would prefer to follow that with, like, what does big scale look like? What would this look like 2 years from now? Good, thank you for that. Now, in my template that I showed at the beginning, I suggest an optional section at the end called progress and milestones. And as Thomas Edison said, vision without execution is hallucination. So, investors love milestones. And you want to be clear. I want to talk separately about milestones looking backward and milestones looking forward. You might add some backward-looking milestones if they're really big deals, like we got our patent on this date, or Google signed their MOU on that date, or big deals. But more so, I'm interested in forward-looking. And funding is all about milestones. You want to say, we're raising money to go achieve. We're going to achieve our first 10 enterprise customers by March of 2016, whatever. We are going to have hired our VP of sales by whatever. But funding gets, when the funding does happen, it's going to be tied to those milestones. It's going to become an agreement that, we're giving you this money, you commit to us that you're going to go achieve these such and such. So think really hard. And you do not want to overcommit either. The last thing you want is to make big promises, and then your first investors discover you're not able to deliver, and that makes it much harder to get the next investors in, because they're going to call the earlier investors and say, how's it going here? So, okay. Finally, when you talk about your team, there's a basic, I may be stating the obvious, but give everybody a very clear title. It's super important. We got to know who's the CEO. We got to know how everybody's role in this company. We will, at the earliest angel stage, occasionally you'll get, like the 3 smart EE engineers just came out of Stanford in the same class, and they haven't decided, they're building this cool product, but they haven't decided how they're going to break out responsibilities. There are well-publicized studies that show that the earlier you make important decisions, like who plays what role and what your equity distribution is in your company, the earlier that decision's made, the higher your likelihood of success of your company. And this is pure hypothesis, but the hypothesis is that proves that you know how to make tough decisions quickly and move forward. So don't show up an investor without being clear about that. Yes, sir?
How do you deal with the issue when you don't have a full team?
Oh, wow. How do you deal with the fact that you don't have a full team? Well, you're welcome to the crowd. You're in a room full of people that don't have a full team. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a simple answer to that. That could be, we need to find the right person to come in and talk about that for an hour. It's all, I will say, it's all about build your network early and wide. Don't wait until you have to have the network to build the network. Unfortunately, if you're asking the question, but you got to be out there everywhere. It's like one of my prime mentor from my days at Intel Corporation once when I was very early in the whole startup world, I was saying, you know, I want to learn from people who really understand this. How would I do this? And he says, you know, it seems to me it's a no-brainer. You just constantly put yourself in target-rich environments. So you come to places like this, or if you're trying to hire engineers, don't come here, go where the engineers hang out, you know. So, and if you're hiring marketing people, go to the marketing meetups. And I'm not an expert on that topic, but it's working your network is the simple answer. And finally, as you list people on here you want to, like when I'm looking, on first blush, like looking at an executive summary, I'm going at a pretty rapid rate. When I look at team, no-brainer. I'm just looking to see, the first thing I'm looking for is who was at a reputable company. Because then I'm more likely to be able to go check up on it, because I might be able to know somebody who knew them or whatever. So anybody who had any affiliation with any company that people are going to tend to recognize, get that on there. And then the more you can say about the amazing contributions they did, that's all the better. But you know, sometimes I'll see an executive summary where, and I know they're really good people, but they'll say, you know, John Smith, he's a deep expert in machine learning. Well, do I have to just take your word for it? Can you tell me where he was a deep expert in machine learning so I have a better chance of checking up on him? You know, you're trying to make my life a little easier. Okay. And finally, never underestimate the importance of advisors. Do everything you can to get interesting, as reputable as possible people to sign on as advisors. Throw them a very small amount of shares. They'll feel honored. They may not have to talk to you more than, an hour a month. And get them on there, and first of all, they can really help you, which is most important, but their names on these lists can be tremendously valuable. Because, I'm going to look at this executive summary. Chances are, I've never heard of any of your team, but I might have heard of one of the advisors, and that's a really good thing. It's just more for fun. I'm going to say what not to do in executive summary. Definitely don't keep it super simple. It's just pure text, no fancy graphics, because I'm just looking for facts. And usually trying to get any kind of a visual in there is wasting more space for what could have been useful information in my mind. I just can't emphasize this enough. I was in a meeting this afternoon with 2 colleagues. We were reviewing 3 different executive summaries. Every one of them, we ran into terms in the executive summary that none of us knew what it was. And we couldn't find it in Google. It was like, we use a UMR for the HZV, I just made that up, but I was saying earlier, think about it as empathy. You have to put yourself in there. Try anything you do to put yourself in their shoes, and imagine somebody who doesn't. Here's what I think is a funny irony: is that in some ways, angel engagement in some ways is a little harder than VC in one following way. If you get further down the path to VC funding, and you get introduced in to John Doe partner at Norwest Venture Partners, then when you go there, there's a high chance he's brought in some expert of his that knows your world inside and out because he already built the company and sold it there or whatever. And then when you're there, there's nothing you're going to say that somebody on the other side of the table doesn't understand. That's great. Well, you talk to angels, you're talking to one person. The odds that they understand your world are about 1 in 20. It all depends. So you might get lucky, and if you're lucky, great. But most of the time, you're not getting lucky. So keep this. I have friends in venture who routinely say, and it sounds humorous, but they're serious. They'll say, when I look at that executive summary, my mother should understand it. And please forgive the sexism. I didn't make it up. But it's true. You don't want to risk that they read through this thing and they get halfway through and they're like, I don't understand this. What are we going to do now? Because if you don't believe in that thing, you're not going to take the meeting. And if you don't understand it, it's like there's an old saying in sales that people don't buy what they don't understand. Meaning if you don't get in there and be very careful explaining exactly what this product is, nobody's going to buy it. Well, it's exactly the same in funding. If they don't, and by the way, they're all arrogant bastards. Pardon my French. that if they don't understand it, they may not want to tell you they don't understand it. Instead, they'll say, oh, this has been a great meeting, let's keep in touch, I'll get back to you. And, and you know where that goes. Yes.
Can I ask your opinion on an opposing view for the executive summary? I had somebody, so we're in a very consumer-centric, design-focused business, and one of our kind of advisors told us that your executive summary should be very visual, it should be very styled, it should show that you have an eye for design. So what are your comments on that?
Well, I hopefully I said it already. I'm giving you generalized advice. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if your comment is right on. I have never been involved in fashion. I know nothing about fashion. So I think it makes sense. I just wouldn't apply that if you were doing data storage. Okay. Oh, here's just a couple of fun ones. I will often get an executive summary that says your revenue projections. Year 1, $500,000. Year 2, $3 million. And I'm thinking, well, when is year 1? Was that last year? Next year? And then there is a common answer. It's post-funding. But I mean, this is just my opinion. Like most of what I'm saying here, take it with a grain of salt. It's just my opinion. You ask somebody else, you may get another opinion. But I'm looking for certainty. I want you to say, I'm driving a stake in the ground. I'm going to make an assumption on when I'm going to get funded. And it may be wrong. And if it's wrong, 3 months from now, you'll update the deck and you'll go right back in again. That's fine. But just put a stake in the ground. Tell us what you're going to do. And on similar lines, I'll often see kind of fluffy wording like, we hope we will do this, or we think we can do that. Like, why would you discount yourself? You say, back to certainty. We will take that hill. We will, whatever. Okay, I think that's it for the executive summary. And this is important too. I said earlier, this is an iterative process. You want to look for feedback everywhere you can get it. So start at the least threatening place you can. It's super important that your team has to be totally on board. They have to help sanity check that you've got it all right. You all have to agree on what the story is. You all have to be singing from the same song sheet. So, get feedback. Everybody on board. I half jokingly say your parents, or it could be any friend, somebody who doesn't live in your domain every day should look at this and point out, is there lingo in there that might be, ununderstandable to the average American, whatever. Then before investors, definitely your advisors, because your advisors, frankly, if you have a good advisory board, there's more chance that they're getting you to more investors than you're getting to yourself. So they gotta be on board with it, give you good feedback, and feel really good that when they send it to somebody, they're not embarrassed by it. And I'm being, it's easy to be embarrassed. It's so hard for you to understand what other people are going to think of your company, because you live in it, it's your baby. So having these, this is one step outside of your inner circle, and they can give you good feedback to make sure it's really believable. Okay, so then you go first to investors that there are certain investors you don't think are that likely to win anyway, but you got in there, great. Fabulous opportunity for feedback, and maybe you get lucky anyway. But now you take their feedback and you go in for the win. Finally, the deck, it's really pretty much the same. I would recommend, if you haven't already heard of it, just go Google it, Guy Kawasaki's 10-20-30 rule. It's not so much the content he talks about, but I love his simple 10-20-30. So try to hold it down to about 10 slides. You can have 100 slides of backup for every possible question they might give you, but if you haven't ever been in one, VC meetings amazingly are all alike. You walk in there, their assistant ushers you into the room, lets you set up your material, get ready to present, gives you your soda. Then that VC comes walking in the room on the hour. He's all tired out because he just was in 2 more of these before. And he says, okay, tell me all about it. And so, yeah, and you gotta leave plenty of time for discussion. You want to leave the early 10 minutes or so of just a lightweight get to know each other, because they're so frantic that you want them to calm down before you really dive in. Don't let them say, okay, go. Don't do that. You say, hey, what I love to do is we'll say, hey, John, I know you well, but my friends here, the entrepreneur CEO, we've looked at your website, but we'd rather hear in your own words, tell us all about what your firm is and what you look for. And they love this. Now they get to brag about what they're looking for and what's special to them, and you listen very carefully, because now you might be able to spin doctor as you go based on something you just heard. They may say, you might get lucky. They'll say, we're looking for A, B, C, and then later on you're going to explain that that's what you deliver is A, B, C. Anyway, so 10 slides, 20 minutes. And they'll give you 1 hour, and then they're going to head off to their next meeting. There's no guarantee it's like this, but 2/3 of the time it looks like this. So 20 minutes, this is 20 minutes without interruptions. With their interruptions, you could easily be up to 40 minutes, but you need plenty of time at the end. You need time to the end to ask about, like, what are we going to do next? Don't let them, it's horrible to ever let everybody walk out of the room, but without being very clear what's going to happen next. Don't just forget, if you don't pester them, there is a chance that they're going to forget and you'll never hear from them again. So, okay. Oh, I did it again. The pitch deck, in essentially everything I've said for the last half hour, you just reproduce it in a very simple visual way. That's maybe more of a whole other presentation to talk about. But keep it simple. As Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. You remember that you're there to deliver the message. The slides are just kind of backdrop. So never make them read something. This happens to me, like at the Band of Angels. Every month we do a dinner meeting where we have 3 entrepreneurs who've been through a long vetting process. 3 entrepreneurs get their chance to talk to. It'll be typically about 70 investors in the room that night. They get to talk for 10 minutes. And often there will be a guy or woman, whatever, up there, and they'll have a bunch of words all over the slide. And literally, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I got a choice. I'm not that bright. I can either read that slide or I can listen to what you're saying. And so why would you do that? Just keep the slide, if there are visuals, you put them up there. If you want to make bullet points, do maybe 3 bullets, 2 or 3 words per bullet. All it is like I just can't say enough about get the words off the slide. Because nobody, if they're really listening to you, and your job is to make them listen to you because you're the expert, don't let them be wasting their time reading slides. Okay, I think I've made my point about it. Once you get into the meeting, embrace objections, because you're going to learn from that. You're going to go back and reiterate based on those objections. And I already made this point too. This is not what your slides should look like. This is what the U.S. government does, not what you as an elegant speaking startup founder would do. Rather, what I would rather have you go do, the best example you could possibly do is just go back to the historical Steve Jobs presentations. It's the ultimate in elegance. His slides, at best, they had about 5 words on them. Most of the time, no words on them. It's very story-oriented, as I talked about before. It's of course an apples to oranges comparison, because he's a big company introducing big products, and you're a startup just beginning to get off the ground. But the style, it's not the content of his presentation I'm comparing against, it's the style of delivery and the style of how the slides support what he says. So I definitely would seriously suggest going back and listening to some of those videos. And that's it for my formal presentation. I'm giving you my email address. I will offer one thing. I was saying to somebody over here right before I came up here that I do this talk moderately a lot, and I will tend to get a lot of email after the talk, so I can't guarantee what kind of feedback I give. But here's what I would suggest to you. If you want some kind of feedback, email me once and ask for the template I use for that executive summary. And I should have put it on a website somewhere, but I haven't. So email me and say you want the template. I'll give you the template. You fill out the template to the best of your ability, and I'll do my best to offer you feedback. And Thank you. I've probably gone way over time, so do we have a little...
It's great that you offer your email address,
Okay.
right?
Oh, can I offer one other suggestion too? What I also tend to get after these meetings is a big pile of LinkedIn requests. And I'll tell you, and I'm telling you this not so much about me, but I think about engaging investors in general. Don't just send a random email, a LinkedIn request and say, let's connect, because I only connect to people I really know. Your job, for people like me or similar kinds of people, is find a way to have some relevant connection or offer up some kind of valuable, useful information or do something other than, I want to connect. You know, like, never send to anybody a LinkedIn request that's the automated boom send. I never send the automatic, it's always, hey, here's why I would like to connect, here's where we met, so that's my final
Do you
advice.
have a little bit of time for some questions?
I do, yeah.
I think we have time for a couple questions. Any burning questions? I'll bring the mic over there. All right? Just one second. So everybody can hear the question.
How does one get in front of the band of angels?
Thank you for asking that question. I had no idea that question was going to come. Well, it is, the way our organization works is you have two choices. You can randomly send something in. You can go to our website, bandangels.com, bandangels.com, and you can submit a business plan, or like an executive summary there. But I have to give you fair warning that the odds for a just tossed over the transom success of funding it's probably 10 or 20 to 1 worse than if you manage to develop a relationship of some kind somewhere with one of our members. So, many of you, or most of you probably don't know one of our members. You can go to LinkedIn, and most all of us, you'd be able to figure out on LinkedIn, you just look for Band of Angels, you'll find these people. But the best advice I can give if you don't see the direct connection to begin with is just find somebody who can do a warm intro. There's probably a decent chance that you know somebody who knows somebody. And if you don't meet that criterion, it's a little tougher. That we do, that's, go to events where you find people like me speaking and see if you can kick off some kind of relationship. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Anita, and my question is more specific to not all products today, startups have disruptive inventions, right? They're largely something like the Google example you gave, where Google was there when there were other players in the market as well, and I have such a product too, which I don't think I'm ready to talk about it. But how do you think, I know that we have a certain way that we want to position ourselves, there are some additional benefits that we have, but the question that always comes up is, ABC, let's say these are our competitors, then how much time would they take? They have X percentage of the market share. It wouldn't take them much time to develop these features or this functionality. So I always get these kind of questions, and I do have answers for those, but I'd like to hear from you, your opinion and your insights on how one should deal with this kind of situation, or when such a question is asked. Thank you.
Well, in a way, I feel like you know the problem, and you have to find the solution. It's like there has to be some kind of differentiation. There has to be.
There is a differentiation. There
Well,
are differences.
then you.
I think the question is that how, so it all boils down to...
Well, I think it's a little hard for me to answer not knowing what the case is, because my answer probably depends upon the case. But I deal with this all the time. Companies I'm involved in, everybody has competition, by the way. You're not alone. It's a question of how closely similar the competition is. Sometimes it looks very different, but still threatening. Sometimes it's very similar. And like the Google thing, who knows what they said when they met I know who their first 2 investors were. I'm sure part of it was just, for them, it was a phenomenal team that was executing really well and showing great, intellect. But they did have a unique algorithm. And even though there were multiple search engines out there, and even though I'm sure for them it was debatable whether they would ever have a business model that would really pay off big, they did have a differentiator, and they were already showing evidence of why technically they were better than Alta Vista and Yahoo's search engine and whoever. But yeah, it all depends. I'm trying to think of it. I don't really know that there's a general answer to your question.
Let's say Airbnb, which is a multi-billion
Yep.
company now, and if you're going to be, not that we are
Yep.
going to go up against them, if I wanted to go up against Airbnb, and if we had some differentiators, how do you think one should position oneself along with the differentiators which are ensuring they are right there?
It all depends. I mean, I can't say anything
So I
without
think
knowing.
one is obviously the way I think what we're trying to define is what is our customer acquisition strategy. which
That'd be
is
great.
through-
Customer acquisition strategy.
Which is through some strategic
It could be.
relationships, our API.
I think almost anything on my long list of topics you need to talk about could possibly be a differentiator. It could be IP, but I think you said you probably don't have an IP, unique, protectable IP, but it could be secrets you have that they don't know. It could be your team has incredible backgrounds that might make a big difference. There just might be. That's where I'm having trouble.
Invest in a company. If you had let's say 2 companies having a similar product, so one of them had an IP, the other one had a customer acquisition strategy. Which one would you do?
Oh, you'd never know without knowing the
No,
situation.
if it's an Airbnb, let's say it's another Airbnb.
Well, no, I mean, there'd have to. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to cut this one off because I would have to listen to you talk about your company for 45 minutes and then answer this question.
We have one more question, I think, and then we run out of time.
Hi, Bruce. My name is Ricky, and my question is, what's the right time for founders to approach angels, as in how much traction they should have, the stage of the product, and so on?
As late as you can wait. Well, I mean, that's another it depends. Like, for example, if you were doing complex hardware, everybody knows that's really hard and very expensive. You better have an incredible story behind it, but you might get funded before you've ever talked to a customer. It's possible. It's really hard, but it's possible. Okay, let's take a different example. Let's say you're some variation on Airbnb with a really unique differentiation. You better have many customers. You better, now, of course, even angel, sorry for being so waffly on this, but typically angel funding kind of dribbles in. The first angel investor typically in a company probably wrote a $20,000 check pretty early, but then by the time they get to the band for a official band of angels funding, we need to be involved in a $300,000 to $1 million round. So you may have raised money. Most of our companies have already raised money before they even get there, often from some of our members. But I mean, the only answer I have is the longer you can wait, the stronger position you're in. So, and for every company, it's a really difficult decision. I tend to be involved in the companies when they go to like Series A funding. Same issue. We know the longer we can wait, the stronger position we're in. But meanwhile, we're suffering every day because we really need money. So.
Bruce, we really appreciate you coming and talking with us. We really appreciate it. Let's give one more.